if you don't play, there'll be disciplinary problems for it. And there was a lot of threats from, not particularly threats, but people saying, if this happens, we'll be kicked out of the league, everyone will lose their jobs, everyone's going to lose this.
And welcome back to the Back Ted podcast. It's been another whirlwind 7 days. Joining me as always, our co-host Matt Shaw. Matt, how are you?
Very well. Another mad week in the world of rugby league. So
Yeah.
We're here to discuss it and try and make sense of it.
Well, one man who can help us make some sense of it all is the man sat to the left of me. He's played a small part in a huge, big story that's happened all season. He's none other than the former Salford prop, Joe Bullock. Joe, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Yeah, glad to be here.
Is it good to be out of the Salford situation?
It is, yeah. It's a relief to kind of look forward and focus on myself now in that respects. But it's also it's a sad story, which I'm sure we'll touch on through this show. But it's it's been a crazy season so far. Yeah,
well, we sure will be diving into Joe's experiences during his time at Salford and amongst some other clubs as well in his long career. Before we do all of that, though, do not forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you do not miss a single beat once again here in the world of rugby league from the all-out rugby league team. Right then, off the back of that, let's get into this week's show. So, some big news again over the last 7 days coming out of the world of rugby league, and there's only one place to start, as we do every week. Matt, you've got a minute. Try and give us the roundup. Off you go.
Okay, let's start with some governance. The RFL will meet with Sport England this week as they have some concerns over things going on there. Of course, Nigel Wood's return hasn't been finalised yet. They would like to seek some clarification. This is an important story because they do provide a lot of funding to the sport. On to recruitment. Lewis Dodd, where will he end up? Hearing that Catalan Dragons are very keen to bring him over. And on the Salford front, Shane Wright is another player in command. St Helens pretty much got a deal done for him for next year, but they would like him before the transfer deadline. Can they get that done? It's in 10 days' time, some moving parts there. And of course, here we are again, talking about Salford. This week, they hit new lows, allegations made against the owners from a former employee. And then, of course, they withdrew from their game against Wakefield Trinity over player safety concerns. What that means moving forward, we don't yet know. An ever-evolving story. But it certainly gets grimmer and grimmer by the week.
Well, yeah. Well, there's only really one place to start. Salford, Joe. A sad state of affairs, really. But before we dive into it, let's just rewind back to the feeling you had when you signed for the club. What did Joe Bullock feel like once he put pen to paper?
My move to Salford had kind of been a long thing coming. I've been in talks with him quite a while with roles going there, and while I was still at Warrington, I was coming to the end of my contract there, and I ended up going on loan, and I kind of fell in love with the club and what the club was about, and the atmosphere that we had there with the players. The culture was really good, and it was an exciting place to go to, and that was kind of what sold me on it. I think one of the big pressing things of what stopped me signing there previously was the finances. And it was always something of like, every year they've had to sell players, haven't they? And, to make sure that they get through that following season, they sold Tyler Dupree and Brodie Croft and players like that. So that was a pressing matter for me that I wanted to try and find out about. But I was reassured quite a lot that although they have these problems, they always manage to level the books at the end of the year, and they always find out and, find a way to make themselves through it. And the wages have never been not paid to players, and that kind of was the swinging point for me. And in the end, they kind of convinced me that everything was going to be fine, and convinced me to sign there. And in my experiences of going there on loan as a player, and the playing side of it was all positive. So I think it was kind of bit of a no-brainer on a rugby side for me to go there. And I gave up a contract at Warrington. I had a 2-year deal I just signed, and then ended up going there. And the rest is history, really, from where it's been. But
because it must have been, the way Salford were improving and making semi-finals and playoffs, and some of the stuff they were playing, the outside backs that you had were incredible to watch. Again, you must have been thinking that I'm here, I am again. You played for some big clubs, Joe, and Salford, although they weren't really classed or deemed as a big club, they were making a lot of noise up and around the top end of that table. So, I mean, you must have been really excited to get to have an opportunity to play there.
Yeah, I think playing against them, there's such a tough side to play against. And when I went there on loan and Rolls, got me into the club and started playing for him, it was an exciting team to be a part of. We threw the ball around. It was exciting to watch. It was exciting to be in. And the players we had, like I said, Tim Laffine and McDonald on an edge. The players we had in the middle, were hard workers and grafters, and it was just a fun place to be. And the environment that we had in training and outside of training was really good. And they sold me on that point. I was sold on that. I wanted to go there and play for him. It was just the finances behind the scenes that was kind of holding me back a little bit. And I think we were really misled as players. I think I'm not the only person who's been misled on that respect, but we've definitely been misled about how serious things were, because they kind of sold it to us that there wasn't a problem. And obviously there is. When
was the first alarm bell?
The first alarm bell, I'd say, probably the fact that they needed a £500,000 advancement. It's a lot of money, to find yourself in a black hole. I'd say maybe a couple $100,000 would be acceptable sometimes over the off season when you're not bringing money in, but that kind of money up front is a lot. But that was reassured that, we've got sponsorships coming in, we've got this coming in, we've got, I think, something with the ground, with an advertisement board that was all going to go through. And that was all going to come through and the club would be fine. And then we went to Portugal on a camp, and at the end of that camp, it was like, right, we got the news that things weren't as rosy and as good as they appeared to be. And I think after that.
I was just going to say, because you joined in end of October pretty much, or that's when it was announced, and they'd gone through a period of signing Chris Hill, yourself, Justin Sangre, all pretty late. And then within a month, they're asking for $500,000. Now, in my mind, that was bonkers, because surely they would have been able to predict that things were bad at the time they were signing you guys. That must have been a bit of a shock to the system for you, because, as you said, you've sort of sought all those reassurances, and then that must have been quite alarming, very alarming.
Yeah, definitely. I think the fact that I had that assurance that finances were fine, and there wasn't a problem there, and that there were a little bit of a shortfall of cash, but they were going to make it up in other areas. I had no reason to not believe that. For years, for the last how many years, 5 years in the sport, they've had to sell a player, to maybe get through, but they've got through Super League and they've actually improved on the field, and they've been a really competitive team. So I had no reason to not believe that they were going to be fine. And then, like you said, we signed a lot of great players, and I thought we finished fourth in the league in that in 2024. I thought it was only looking up. Everything we had in pre-season was like, we're going to compete, we're going to want to win a trophy, want to try and get to Wembley, we want to compete in the back end of the year, we want to be top four, pushing for the playoffs. I thought we were going to be a real big competitive club, and it's just, I think we've just really been had the wool pulled over our eyes in a way, like off the field, and the people running the club behind the scenes have not been honest with us as players, and possibly as staff. I think as staff have probably been misled as well.
Mm-hmm. There was a lot of media around that time with the $500,000, which you'll be well aware of, and the RFL went in and did that financial audit. The club was recommended to sell players. There were loads of talk of fire sales and this and that, and clubs were being told that they have to sell. No one left. Why, from your perspective, why did nobody leave? Was it because of what they were telling you, out of loyalty? What was the reason why so many players?
Yeah, I think so. I think as a player perspective, we had a great group. We had a group who we genuinely believed we could be competitive and win things with. So we didn't want to lose that. And people didn't willingly want to just get off and leave that environment. And then the chat we were getting from the coaches was that things are going to be good. You know, like we've got these new owners coming in, that things are going to turn around, and you know, everything was going to be positive on the back of that. So I think that's why nobody left, and you know, it just kind of. I just generally think that nobody was really told the exact truth of what was actually transpiring at that club and what was happening behind the scenes. Because you know, obviously people have had to end up leaving and, you know, looking after themselves and looking after their own you know, families and careers. So it's just a bit shame really how it's all kind of transpired over this year.
Joe, are you still in? Well, I'm assuming obviously with you leaving now, you've probably had your final conversation with the club. Are you still in touch with the players? And then you know, how did that final conversation between you and the club go?
With me, I ended up going on loan to Barrow. We had some differences with me playing in that team, you know, which is. You know, could be strictly down to a rugby thing, which is fine.
What differences, Joe?
I'm not too sure. I had a few injuries, and I was in and out of the team with injuries. And then when I was playing, he pulled some things performance based on what I was doing, which is absolutely fine. You know, like as a player and a coach, you're going to have them discussions and you're going to have them differences. Yeah. And then it got to a point where he didn't want me in the team anymore, and he sent me out on loan. And I think as soon as that happened, and I looked and I could see from the outside of what was going on in that place, I was just like, I think it's time that I actively try looking to leave. At this point, we'd already lost maybe 6 or 7 players anyway, and I think the writing was on the wall really for my time at the club there, and that was just time for me to start looking to move on.
You didn't get paid before the Hull KR game, did you? It was round 3 or 4. You got beat heavily. How was that little period? Because the performance was quite telling, and understandably so. But then I think you'd been told you were going to get paid the day after, then it was next week. And that was the first time, wasn't it, that the pay hadn't actually landed. That felt from the people I spoke to, that felt like a significant moment, because that was when tangibly the players were feeling the impact of what was going on.
Yeah, I think that was a big moment because we'd just been taking out the special measures as well the week before at Leeds. So I think the performance weren't the best as probably as we wanted it. You know, I think everyone was expecting a big performance, and we didn't get that performance there. And so we were wanting a big performance this week against Hull KR, who are obviously the top flying team in the league. But then all that kind of creeped back into it off the field, and I think that impacted. You know, the whole mood of the camp shifted from being a rugby mindset of let's go out there and put performance on, and it's like becoming all the things, you know, like thinking about like, is this club actually in trouble? What's happening? You know, and then we went into special measures again. So it was all that little period there was kind of the roller coaster of everything's going to be fine. Well, we're back. Performance weren't good, but then all of a sudden it weren't even about performance. It was about if this club's actually in a stable state and is it going to survive? And it's just kind of been a roller coaster up and down since then.
Yeah. Joe, what was that? What was it like dealing with all that? You know, as a player, but forget the playing side of it. The fact that you think you're going to get paid and then you're not going to get paid, and just tell our viewers, because ultimately as players we're judged on the 80 minutes of the weekend, aren't we? That's it. 80 minutes. If it's good enough, yes, move on. If it's not, what are we going to do about it? But me and you, and we know there's so much more intricacies throughout the week. What was it like? As obviously you have a young family as well. So just tell us what it was like.
Yeah, but I think, like I said, people see only the rugby player side of it. But it's a job at the end of the day. Like if you were going to work and you were as a plumber and you were told that you weren't going to get paid, like you'd have worries, wouldn't you, about where your finances are going to come from and how you're going to provide for your family. So I think as that perspective, it was difficult because everyone's got families to provide for, and regardless of what your salary is, if you're on 50 grand or you're on 100 grand, like nobody can live without money coming through the door. And so I think that was tough. And then you had people in camp who were focused on having those worries and those struggles about where the money's going to come from and how they're going to provide for the family, and other people who were thinking more on the side of let's just play. It doesn't matter. It'll be what it'll be. And I think you had that kind of bit of a conflict in camp then. Nobody was on the same page 100% of where we wanted to go forward with it. because everyone had their own different kind of motivations or different perspectives of what they wanted to do. So that was difficult. I think I had a little bit of time away, for, my own mental health and my own thoughts to kind of step away from it. And it was only when I stepped away from training and had a couple of weeks off, I realised just how much it was affecting me and how much it was, because you kind of get into a bubble of, oh, let's just keep training, let's just keep playing, but you're going out there putting your body at risk every single week. It's a sport where you could really hurt yourself in an instant, or your career could be over in an instant because of just the manner of what we do. And in that instant, when you're not in the right mind frame for it, I think it adds to the stresses and the pressures. And it was only when I kind of stepped outside of that box and I realised, just how much it was bothering me and how much it was impacting my life.
So I just want to hold you there. You said for your own mental health. So did you have a period of time away from training, away from playing? And what was it that what were your what were your symptoms in all of that time? Like what was it? The stress and anxiety of it all?
Yeah, just the stress of it. I think we were getting told that we were going to play games with 14 players, and that we don't have any because we were in the salary, the cap restrictions, that we couldn't play certain players, so we were going to have to go into matches with just 14. And I think people were injured, so it weren't just 14 fresh players, it was 14 players with niggles and injuries and stuff like that. And I think it was, I voiced up the concerns of player welfare, which is quite ironic now that they've pulled out of a game for player welfare issues, and it was an issue that I was bringing up earlier in the season, that, it's not right what's happening here to players. So I ended up taking some time away from training and took myself outside of that box just for myself, for my own kind of well-being. And I just thought that was the best thing for me at that time to do. And, and I'm glad I did it, because it really gave me a perspective of looking outside. I think when you're in something like that and it's so intense and it's so kind of raw with everybody and you're trying to battle through it, it's you don't really realise just how it impacts people and their lives. And I think a lot of people have been impacted by it in the squad, but everyone deals with their different ways. That was how I feel I needed to deal with it, and managed to kind of get myself right and get myself back on a positive kind of trait, positive way with it. So
yeah.
Joe, I just wanted to ask about the not playing thing, because there's been a number of occasions where it was muted that the players were not going to play, they were going to take a stand, but by and large they always ended up playing for whatever reason. I just wanted to get into that. What ultimately convinced the players within the weeks leading up to games to play the game? Because it felt like at the start of the week the players were not united, because as you said, there were a few who had their own reasons for playing, but it felt like there'd be a large group who weren't going to play, and then it got to Wednesday, Thursday, and they were playing. Why did that happen?
I think there was a bit of a threat from the club of of discipline of if you don't play there'll be disciplinary problems for it. And there was a lot of threats from not particularly threats, but people saying if this happens we'll be kicked out of the league, everyone will lose their jobs, everyone's going to lose this. And I think that kind of added to the pressure. So I said about the mental health side of it, I think people probably didn't want to play but felt as though they had to because of what was happening. And then you had different people. So others would pull out and say they're not going to play, not going to do it, and then others would kind of feel that they have to because of the group. The majority of the group is in with all of that. So it was they were just quite difficult. And I think we wanted to kind of make a stand and we wanted to make a thing as a playing group, but different people have put the pressure on in a way that made us play in the end. And, I think that we just weren't all united on the same page of what we all wanted from it as a playing group, and then that kind of led to different things happening.
Just in all this, Joe, where have the owners been? And when I say that, have you had meetings with them? Have they communicated to you what's going on? And I'm assuming what I'm trying to get really is, has there been broken promises after broken promise and all this?
Yeah, we have had meetings with them. They've come in and they've spoken, but a lot of the times they talk a lot about what they've gone to do and what they're going to help us with, and that's just not happened. So you could say there's a lot of broken promises there, but from the very first time we met them, they took us out for breakfast and said that, like, we've owned the club now, we've got all the money, and we're going to pump the money into the club and do the right things. And that's just never happened. They were supposed to send £2 million, we had screenshots of this transaction coming through. But then it was delayed because it was on a flight to Australia, and then that was 3 days later, still delayed. It was, how long's this flight to Australia?
It's still not landed now.
Yeah,
it's just circling around and around.
Yeah, it's just still going. I think they're still in the air. And then the check bounced back because they misspelt something on one of the words. I think they said that it was going to Salford Rugby Limited, and they put like Salford FC Limited or something like that. It was just quite comical. Like, it just seems it was excuse after excuse of why they couldn't put substantial amounts of money into the club. There was the communication from the very top to the players has just been terrible. Like, we don't know whether we're coming or going or what's happening week by week. The hierarchy of the club is, like, I think there hasn't been really a hierarchy in the club, and there hasn't been an effective communication from like ownership, CEO, coaches down. And we've just kind of the coaches have just focused on rugby, but we as players have wanted information about other things which we've not been privy to or not been allowed to know.
So, Joe, who's been the spokesman between the owners? You rightly said there the coaches focus on the day-to-day job, but there has to be a communication chain come down there. Who was responsible for day-to-day meetings with these owners to then relay messages to you? And did you feel that you always got the absolute truth as a playing group?
We had Chris Irwin, who was the CEO. He was was a link to it. One of our assistant coaches, is well connected with the ownership group. So we tried to get information out of him, but I think a lot of responses have been quite condescending and quite insulting to players. I think senior players in our group would ask questions, and rightfully curious questions, about their futures and about where the money's coming from. And the answers would be something along the lines of like, it's above your pay grade, stay in your lane. It's not your issues. And
really,
I think that's annoyed people and annoyed players, because it's not just a strictly rugby or a strictly this takeover thing. It's about people's futures and people's livelihoods. And these questions were getting put through as a playing group through the senior players, and then they were getting shot back with.
So who was shooting them back? Sorry.
Some of the certain coaches and certain people in the ownership group who, were just giving us poor answers back. The communication wasn't clear, and it wasn't ever, there wasn't any full information of what we wanted. So we'd go in with a question, and you'd never really get an answer back about it. And I think quite a few times, some of the answers were quite insulting to us as people. Like as an adult, who was just wanting information out of someone, that we can't be trusted with that information. And one thing that we used to get a lot was there was a non-disclosure agreement, and they would just hide behind that non-disclosure agreement. But I feel like it was just an excuse to not give us the information that we wanted. It was an easy excuse.
And that's been common because they've said the same about the stadium, haven't they? There's always every
NDAs,
single line of communication between there's NDAs. They even said it in the statement the other week, didn't they? We've respected the NDAs. They haven't. It does feel like an excuse. I was just going to say, and it's not a question to you, it's just a point I thought to make. I thought Chris Nanninu's comments about the owners last week, like, just read the room. Everything that's going on, and he defends it. I'm just thinking, come on. Like,
yeah, it's difficult because, you got to know a lot of these people, and, as through your time in the club, and I feel like you've been let down. We have players have been let down a lot by what's happened, and and the responses to a lot of questions and responses to your pressing matters, and which I think of more than warranted. With the way things are going, absolutely. We should be able to get answers, and the answers have just never come. And I still think to this day now, I'm not in the picture anymore now there, but I've still not got answers from it, and I still don't think anyone else is going to get answers. And unfortunately, I just think it's just going to keep going that way until whatever happens at Salford.
Well, look, obviously, there's so much more we could delve into. We could talk about this for hours and hours, and I'm sure there'll be many, many more stories, anecdotes that come out of it over the rest of the time ahead, Joe. But I just want to finish with, look, if you, as in Joe Bullock, who do you blame in all of this?
It's tough. I blame. I think there's a bit of blame towards the owners who obviously have come in and not fulfilled their promises. You know, I think as an owner of not just if an owner of a business but as a sports club as well, and it's not just your players, it's everyone who's connected to the club, like people working back staff, all the backroom staff, and you know, in the shop, all that kind of thing. There's a responsibility to kind of, you know, put your money up front and, you know, do the right thing. People don't make money in sports clubs, you know, like it's a losing, that's a known fact. So I think for them to come in and just not put that money in, do the right thing by the club is a big thing. But then the fact that who's let these people come in and take over the club in the first place, and that goes on the RFL, and that goes on the people at the very top of this sport who have looked at this situation and thought that these two people were obviously capable of coming in and running this rugby club, because they're clearly not. You know, like, they clearly haven't got a clue what they're doing, and it's you know, it's not just ruined people's careers at Salford and, you know, like, and their time at that club. You know, like, it's ruining people's, you know, the club that people have supported for the whole life. You know, like, the fans are probably the people who are going to be the most affected by it. Because players come and go, owners come and go, but, you know, as you see with the protests that happened outside the stadium, you know, the fans are the ones who are always there, and I think they're the ones who are going to be, you know, hurting from it the most.
Well, look, everybody at All Out Rugby League, you know, it's really good to hear the players' perspective. It feels a little bit more real, doesn't it, when you hear from Joe's perspective on things. But, you know, moving on from your former club Salford to another one of your former clubs in Wigan, you know, clearly a million miles away in terms of how healthy they are on the field, but a loss to Hull KR. Which, by the way, you didn't see me put anything out on social media. My margin was correct in the predictions.
You didn't get the scoreline.
I didn't get the scoreline right, but I got the margin and the team. You and Longy both went for Wigan. So just thought I'd drop that one in there. But Joe, Hull KR, wow, they're flying this season, aren't they?
They are, yeah. They've been building for quite a few years, haven't they? Really, I think they're doing things right off the field, you know, and behind the scenes, and that's showing, you know, fruitful for on the field activities, because you can't just do it on the field; it's got to come from other areas as well. And I think they've been investing right. They've been building a good culture at the club, and, you know, they're a tough team to go against. The atmosphere at Hull KR games is, you know, incredible. It's one of the hardest places to go and play, but it's also, I feel like, one of the most enjoyable, because it's a great atmosphere and it's a great occasion, but it just makes for a tough day. But, you know, they're flying, they're doing well, they've finally won a trophy, which, you know, could prove massive in the end of the season when they get to the grand final, because I think that's been probably that sticking point for them of have they got enough to get over the line? Well, they have now, so I don't think there's anything holding them back.
And your former team, as we mentioned, Wigan, played in grand finals with them. How do you sum up their performances in season 2025? Where do you think Wigan are at? You've been in the inner sanctum. You know what that club's all about. How do you think they will be feeling right now?
They'll be hurting. I think that performance probably isn't a Wigan performance, and I think, you know, the coaching staff will be looking at it and thinking, you know, like, you know, we can be better, we can do better, and I think the players also will be knowing that. I think it was quite uncharacteristic of a Wigan team with the amount of errors that they made. You know, but following on from last year when they've won everything there is to win. You know, you'll know, like, you're in that Saints team where you won everything. There's going to be a dip. You know, there has to be a dip, and Wigan's hit their dip, but that doesn't mean the season's over. You know, I think they've got big players to come back. Bevan French is coming back. He makes such a difference to that team, and any team he would play in, he makes a big difference. So it could be, you could look at this at the end of the grand final, and if they go and win it, and think this is the best thing for Wigan now, because
you took the words right out of my mouth.
It's just give him that fire again, and, you know, like, when you're winning everything, you need something to aim for, and now they've got something to work on and perfect and go for again.
I was going to play devil's advocate here. Do we not think that Wigan might sit in the changing rooms after the game and go, we had no Bevan,
yes,
we had no Luke Thompson,
yes,
we had no Nsemba. We've played rubbish with the ball. I've not seen Wigan that bad. And they've lost by 4 points. You guys are players. You'll have been... I just think I'd be going, if we get going, I fancy playing these.
Yeah. Matt, this is something that I've been speaking about with with people outside of the game all weekend. I think back to Magic Weekend when Catalan Dragons beat us. I don't think they scored 3 tries in the last 5 minutes and done us with a drop goal. It was that game that had we won that, we were riding that high of a wave that we almost, you fall into that, you're winning all the time. You get into that you're cocky, and it's not an individual thing. It's like a group mentality thing where every now and again having a little sort of uppercut or a loss landed on you is healthy. We knew that when we got them in the grand final that we'd beat them. And it happened. So I absolutely agree with you. But with the Perriers, I think Wigan will be sat there going, right, we've got a lot to come back. We didn't play our best game, and we've only just lost by 4 points. I really hope that is a grand final, Joe. Hull KR Wigan. It deserves to be that, doesn't it? Obviously, look, Saints and Leeds, they're coming very dangerous at the moment.
Saints, I'm telling you.
Yeah, no, another big win for them. But I just think that, everybody, a lot have predicted, haven't they? Hull KR Wigan.
And you'd be foolish not to, aren't you, when you're looking at it. But I think the exciting thing is the playoffs is looking like it's getting exciting. There's a lot of teams coming and finding the form, and the big thing with playoff rugby is it's not the form goes out the window from your for your season. It's what you time it right. How many times have you seen it? Like time you run right. To get, it doesn't matter what you've done earlier on. You just time that run, and you can get yourself to a grand final and win it. And I think Leeds been there a couple of years ago, didn't they? Out of nowhere, got to a grand final. So there's teams who can, everyone in that picture can get there. And I'd even say if Warrington switch it on, the team that they've got, they could just sneak a 6th spot, and then they could just, because they've got some more
still have a soft spot there, Joe.
No, it's I just think the players are too good in the team to turn it on, and they're an outside, such an outside shot, but then you've got Hull, Warrington all fighting for that 6th spot, and they could all be competitive, and they could knock someone off on the day.
You say that, Joe. I think for the Wolves, we've said it a number of times. I think it was like this week they have to win. With Wakefield, I've been 2 points given to them, and another 2 points will be given to them. You just feel that door for the Wolves. Although, look, there is a crack of daylight there. There's a chance for that door to still be open for the playoffs. Look, mathematically is what I'm saying.
There's always a chance. You never know.
Mathematically, but whilst you mentioned there Warrington, obviously. I spent a very short time there, but you spent a lot longer there. What do you think it is about Warrington, Joe? Why can't they get over the line? Why is it time after time after time they have all this, this packaging, but they don't have the product there? You know what I mean? They have all these players, this fancy roster, and you think, right, this is the year where they're going to go for it. Why is it, Joe? Why do they fall away? What do you think it's down to?
I'm not too sure. I think because Sam come in and changed things around of how he wanted it. Like I said, they've always had good players, and a good squad, and they spend a lot of money on that squad, and they do things right, like off the field as well. But it's just kind of getting it all together and collectively. And I just think they've had patches where they've been a big team and they've won the Challenge Cups, they've been to grand finals, and they're just a bit like Hull KR. They just couldn't get over get the foot through the door to finally win it. And I think that kind of hangs on him a little bit, and I think the pressure of every single year of is it our year? It's always your year, and I think that kind of hangs on him a lot. And I think the pressure of we're going to have to win something this year kind of gets to him, and they just fall off because there's some times like in the last 3-4 years when I was there, that we can be a really good team, but then we've also shown signs that we're not a very good team, and we're at the so it's very 50-50, isn't it, around the turn up?
You mentioned there about Hull KR and their struggles of not getting their hands on a trophy. Look, fallen short in Challenge Cups grand finals, finally got their hands on the Challenge Cup this year, and like buses, they've got pretty much one hand on the next trophy, League Leaders Shield. They'll be going for a treble, only the 5th team post-World War II to win the treble. Is that, Matt, is it going to happen?
I don't know if it'll happen, but they've every reason to think it will. They're going to do the double now, aren't they? Even if they can afford to lose with the points difference. 4 of the last 5. No.
Well, they're effectively 7 points ahead, aren't they, with the points difference? Yeah. So 7 points ahead.
They can afford to lose. They can afford to lose 3 games. They aren't going to lose 3 games, and that's if we can win them all. Then they get a home semi. Well, you wouldn't care who they played at home. You'd back them to win, wouldn't you? They would be the favourites. And they're in a grand final. They've won a final now. They've been to Old Trafford. So they have every right to be confident. They've answered every question. They've silenced every doubt people have over them. So, yeah. But if they played Wigan, would they go in as the favourites? I don't know. Because Wigan have that, been there, done it, haven't they? And it is tough.
I think though you'd have to say off the basis of the evidence this year, going into a grand final, the whole KR for me would be 2 points favourite now.
Yeah, I would say so, yeah. Especially with the form of Wigan at the moment. Because Wigan have got everything to do to try and flip their form, which they're very capable of doing. But they've got Hull KR, the team who are riding high. And I think if, like I say, they win that, they get the league leaders, they've got another trophy behind them. They're the ones they're flying in with the wind in the sails, but then they're also the ones who can easily get knocked off the top, and they're the ones who are hunted, and that's a big thing as well, isn't it? So
we'll just hang on to that getting knocked off the top, because there is another story that we're all sort of, we're all thinking they were sat at home come grand final night and watching Hull KR and Wigan walk out, but however, there's a chance that they could finish fourth.
I know.
Look, we've glazed over the importance of the top two. Statistically, you finish in the top two, you've got a much greater chance of walking out at Old Trafford there. But Wigan have got to play Saints away and Leeds at home in their final 5 games. I'll put you on the spot. Will Wigan finish in the top two? Joe, I'll go you first.
Yes, I think they will.
Yeah, I think Bevan French is back this week.
Huge.
And I just think he makes a massive difference. So I think they will. But the team I'm watching at the minute is, I know I spoke about Leeds a lot this year. I'm watching Saints. They're scoring points. They've got Wellesby back. And they've got this period now coming up. I think not this week, but then they play Wigan, League, KR back to back to back. They haven't beat any of them this year. If they go in, but I think it's a great opportunity for them, because if they can get even 2 wins there, they go into the playoffs flying, and they become the team to watch for me then.
Well, we had St Helens legend Sean Long on the pod last week, and he said about Leeds and St Helens who'll be coming home with a wet sail. But just touching on that top two, it was only 14 days ago that we were thinking about Lee getting into the top two. Well, they had a real big dent there dealt to them by John Cartwright's men at the weekend. 16-10 loss, an awful first half really from Lee. Where does that leave Adrian Lamont now? I mean, is he? Do you feel that they're out of the top 2 race, or what do you think?
I don't. But one concern I've got over Lee is they went on that amazing run not too long ago, didn't they? They beat Wigan, they beat Saints, the Hull KR, they beat Saints, they beat Wigan. And I thought, right, because they'd been brilliant at times this year, but then they'd been off a little bit. They'd lost to they lost it poorly in the Challenge Cup semi to Warrington. They'd lost comfortably at home to Wakefield. So I thought, right, they've got over that inconsistency now. But then the last 3 weeks, they've not been great. They scraped home against Warrington. I thought they were okay against Leeds in defeat, but they weren't great. They weren't great at the weekend. So we're back in this wave of a bit hot and cold. So for that reason, I don't think they're in the top 2 race. They could, if they hit the form at the right time, they could. But just all year, they've just not quite been able to be at their brilliant best all the time.
Well, let's flip it. Let's flip that fixture and talk about Hull chasing for the 6. They've got Wakefield have got to go to Wigan this weekend, or is it the other way around? Is Wigan going to Wakefield? I can't
it's
quite
Wakefield,
remember.
Wigan. But Wakefield will be confident. Let's not forget, we haven't even discussed Wakefield yet.
No, exactly.
Wakefield beat Wigan and Leeds at home in the last couple of weeks.
Well, we're jumping ahead. I'm getting onto Wakefield.
I think Wakefield are a little just silently going about the business, and I think they're going to come through and probably sting a few people. I think Hull are.
They got a tough run in Joe Hull.
Yeah, and they've just had a few. I think did Price get injured at the weekend? So they're taking some big strike players out of their team. They've got a lot of good quality players still left in it, but I think Wakefield have just been slowly just going about the business this year. They've not really been blowing loads of noise, but they could come good and just sneak that final spot.
Well, look, another week over, and who will make the playoffs? Who will finish in the top 6? Who will finish in the top 2? And who will eventually get to walk out at Old Trafford? We'll bring you each and every week in the lead up to that. But we ran out of time for another week. Do not forget to like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you can hear all of the latest news when it breaks at All Out Rugby League. From myself, Matt, and Joe, have a good week. Goodbye for now.